At this point, I'm pretty much locked in as a My Hero channel, and since I have this loyal group of followers I can't let down, let's do this. I wanted to start with something new though, and as basic as it sounds, I've noticed throughout the community that while everybody's down to gush over how great the fights are in MHA, no one ever really wants to break down the worst. Typical of YouTube, of course, being too goddamn positive all the time. So you know what, I thought I'd take this on myself, because it's important to point out flaws in something you like. And while I like MHA, it's far from perfect. That being said, I can tell why no one's touched this, because My Hero has done a pretty solid job with their fights. Even finding 5 caused me to nitpick and really dig out some hate for things that I otherwise didn't mind. I only wanted to count major fights because it feels a bit unfair to pick on something like Sero vs Todoroki or Mineta vs Koda. One more thing to get across, I'm just expressing my own feelings on some shortfalls of a thing I like. My opinion doesn't matter. I'm not that great either. I mean, look at me, look at that pathetic facial symmetry. Terrible. I have no impact on your ability to like anything. These are just my thoughts. If you disagree, let me know. Let's talk about this thing we love.
Eat this!
All Might and Deku versus the villain from the Two Heroes movie. So I was having some trouble deciding on a 5th spot, and then I rewatched this fight and remembered I can't really tell what's going on, but also I don't really care all that much. I know it's well animated, but I think just the way everything's moving so fast and there's so much going on screen, it's just a little too chaotic to follow. I really like the idea of seeing All Might and Deku fighting side by side, and I've worked out to nothing but Jet Set Run on repeat for the last 3 years. However, I do have to acknowledge that this fight is pretty much a couple hectic minutes of All Might and Deku running and punching blocks. Speaking of squares, let's talk about this guy. Even as far as shonen filler movies go, Mitsuki is terrible. He has a boring power set, design, motives, and no personality traits besides bad guy. He fails to leave any impression whatsoever on the viewers. And I can prove this. His name's not Mitsuki. That's Bakugo's mom, but I would be amazed if anybody could call me on that. Wolfram trips over an embarrassingly small hurdle and is so forgettable it genuinely brings down the climax of the whole movie. Without the villain, all we really have left is the All Might and Deku stuff, which is, like I said before, visually not really there for me. Also, I don't know what this is.
Eat this!
Deku versus Shinso. Alright, so one of my favorite concepts in MHA's world is the idea of quirk versus ambition. Basically what I mean here is when you're dealt a bad hand at birth, and the nature of your quirk is in direct conflict of your goal. An example of this would be Mirio having to work his ass off so he can walk through a wall, but still hoping to save 1 million people. Or in this case, Shinso trying to be a hero despite having a power that is typically associated with villains, and it pretty much has no combat potential. So, fighting the successor to the strongest and most noble hero to ever exist is a bit of an unfair matchup. Let me make this clear. My issue isn't that what we got wasn't super flashy or action-packed and intense enough. It was that it shouldn't have been as much of a fight in the first place. Our excessively analytical, overthinking main character shouldn't have done the one thing he was told not to do and shut up, nullifying Shinso's power and pushing him out of bounds. This would have preserved 2 things. Number 1, Deku is smart and driven, and number 2, Shinso has great power and a lot of potential, but he needs to figure out how to better apply himself on a battlefield. Instead, we get Midoriya doing something uncharacteristically stupid and still getting saved by the plot going, one for all. The way the manga chapters split up this fight makes me think maybe Horikoshi just wrote himself into a hole in this one, but I'm not certain about that. Either way, it's super lazy, and this makes Deku look like he's covered in plot armor so thick it literally takes the best fight in the series to break it. And Shinso gets it even worse, because now he looks like twice as much of a bitch since he can't fight and his quirk isn't even foolproof. What we have here is a simple premise actively hurting both characters involved just due to some bad decisions. They really did my purple boy dirty here.
Eat this!
Deku vs. Overhaul. Yeah, so here's where I really expect to get murked, because it seems like the majority of fans consider this one of the best fights of the whole series. Visually speaking, absolutely. If someone were to say to me this is the best looking thing in the show aside from Mama Midoriya, I could totally be down with that. This fight does have some of the best moments in the whole show. When Eri leaps to Deku, when Infinite 100% is introduced, that last goddamn punch. But it's looking at the fight as a whole when I can't help but feel a little bit disappointed. The action was limited and kind of bland, and aside from inner monologues and flashbacks, the fight itself was fairly short for all the build-up it got. After unlocking 100%, it's kind of just one kick and two punches, and then I honestly think I would be much more on board with this if it wasn't for the weird choice of music. I know music taste is probably the most subjective thing on here, but I mean, MHA's soundtrack literally became a meme for how it can make hype shit out of anything. So it's weird when we see Deku zipping around in the air, absolutely smacking Overhaul, avenging Night Eye, saving Eri, living up to his promise, and realizing the dream of becoming a hero he never gave up on, even when everyone else doubted him, proving he does have what it takes to become the next symbol of peace. But we hear the All for One theme? That bone-chilling choir that rips away any semblance of hope, that organ that lets you know that certain death is coming. I'm sure the director had their reasons, but I'm having trouble figuring out what tone they were really going for here. Maybe I'm the only one who feels this way, but a lot of the impact of these moments were genuinely stripped away because of such a weird choice of background music. Now for something where I know I'm the only person who feels this way is that the biggest problem with this fight is on a conceptual level. I think it's the magnitude of the fight and its implications which bothered me the most. Seeing Midoriya flying around and fighting this massive monster hundreds of feet in the air, I began to think, this is cool, but feels out of place. It feels more Dragon Ball than My Hero because of the insanity of the sudden leap in power and scale. I don't think it's right for Deku to be beating what is probably the second strongest villain we'd seen up until this point, all on his own. I know he had Eri, but she just becomes an out-of-nowhere power-up, which feels like the bad kind of shonen cliche My Hero usually does a good job of stepping around. It makes it so the win doesn't feel earned, but also sets the bar so high that every fight that comes afterwards will struggle with tension. Look at the gentle fight that comes right after. It's hard to feel the same sense of danger or significance. I know that the circumstances are completely different here, but regardless, after seeing this, it's hard to adjust back to this.
Eat this!
Deku vs. Muscular. For a world as creative as this one, with a huge variety of quirks and potential interesting matchups, it's honestly lame to just see a fight with two guys who are just really strong. Grow some balls, Horikoshi, give me this guy versus this guy. If we're talking strictly action, gotta say I kinda consider this fight the least interesting. There's no strategy or interesting choreography, nothing changes through the fight. Deku literally just wins because he wants it more. He doesn't adapt and try something new. Oh, my 100% smash didn't work. Pfft, 1,000,000%. I've seen that video too, and I know that My Hero Academia's fights are tame because they're not actually about the action, they're about the characters. But the thing is, we just met Koda, and we just see more of the basic ideology of Izuku, which we've been aware of since the first episode, and Muscular just makes the fight seem more hollow. He has no connection to Deku, and while he is linked to Koda, it's done in the clumsiest way and comes off as just an incredible coincidence. Yeah, I'm not that big a fan of Muscular. Take everything I said about this guy, add an even less creative power, throw in a clunky backstory, and top it off with some shoehorned link to another character, and there you go. We meet him, he fights, he loses, we plow through his entire story presence in 2 episodes. I touched on it before, but this is where the trend started of Deku winning his fights by just hitting harder and wanting it more. Seeing him use that big head of his and analyze his enemies and come up with strategies to defeat them always added an extra layer of intrigue to the fights. It separated him from the typical headstrong shonen hero, and it was at this point where Deku kinda started to lose me as a protagonist. It's sad to say too, cause I love that little nerd. And then he had to go and get all cool. Also, we've already seen Deku destroying his body on purpose when he fought Todoroki, so the hype of seeing just how purple he can get isn't there anymore.
Eat this!
Mirio vs. Overhaul. So I feel like up until now, I've been fighting this uphill battle trying to justify why these perfectly fine fights are letdowns. But here, it seems like there's already a decent percentage of the fan base who are feeling mixed to disappointed on this one. When the episode came out, the manga readers were quick to descend on all of us anime-only losers to tell us just how much better it was printed and how if only we knew how to read, we could have experienced the superior version. Then after they kicked some dirt on us and took our lunch money, I actually decided to see if they were right and if the fight really was that much better in the manga. And yeah, kinda. Just about all of the action here is just quick cuts to stills copied directly from the manga. It's almost like they just copied every scene from the manga chapters and then went back in later to fill in the space between them. And it looks even lazier if you know about animation shortcuts and recognize that these are all just single static frames with some kind of effect thrown over them. Even for the movement that is here, a lot of it looks super choppy because the clip got slowed down in post. I know all of this stuff is pretty common throughout the industry, but it's rarely ever this prevalent in a single episode, let alone for a seasonal anime that has a pretty strong track record. It's straight up depressing how little actual animation is in this thing. Like, what's the point of even watching the anime if it's the exact same experience as the manga? Well, to be fair, they did do something different. Ending the fight with a slideshow is such a bizarre but ultimately fitting choice. In the moment, sure, it seems jarring and out of place, but it does perfectly summarize just how half-assed this whole episode was. Even for a montage, this looks shoddy. Like, why do these have such little detail and look so awkward if they were meant to be shown like this? The use of blurs makes these seriously look like in-between frames, like they were animating these clips but for one reason or another decided to just pluck out random stills and show those on their own. Look, obviously this fight was being put on the back burner while the staff was focusing on the Deku Overhaul fight because that was designated as this season's big moment, but this bothers me personally because conceptually this is my favorite moment from the whole show, and Bones really didn't give it the respect it deserved. This had the potential to be one of the best examples of storytelling through action in all of anime. When Mirio jumps in front of the bullet and then continues to fight even after losing his power, we learn so much about his character and one of the most fundamental themes of the whole series. All the way back in the first episode, Midoriya asks if he can be a hero without a quirk, and everyone, including All Might and his hot mom, say no. And then we have Mirio getting right back up after becoming powerless to fight this guy who can literally kill someone by touching them, all in order to save this little girl. At the start, the story asks, what does it take to be a hero? And Tenten answers it right here. But Bones totally fumbles it, and this moment gets buried under the studio's poor decisions. This is something new I tried out, and I know it's still a little rough around the edges, but I enjoyed it, and I can't wait to try it again. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to hit up the comments and tell me what your least favorite My Hero Academia fight is, or you can call me a coward for not liking the Overhaul Deku fight, whatever you're feeling like. I'm thinking of doing my top 5 favorite fights next, probably as damage control, so subscribe if you want to see that. Maybe you could slap me with a like too, I'd really appreciate that. Take it easy everyone.